Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, July the 16th, and I'm glad to be here. I haven't been around for a while. I've been taking a break as well as couldn't afford to do the shows, unfortunately. And I've been working on a whole lot of things, catching up on studies and trying to help my sweetheart and stuff like that. He's terminally ill and very sick, and so I've been quite busy and also looking for work and spending a lot of time looking for full-time work. So that was a job in itself. So I'm glad to be back, and I will be doing shows regularly, probably just once or twice a week, probably Mondays and maybe Sunday nights or something, just for now. Possibly Tuesday nights. There may be some guests coming on the show, so I might schedule some Tuesday nights too. So thanks everybody who's tuned into my shows. I tell you, I look and I see how many shows people have listened to, and there's over 47,000 shows listened to. That's a lot of shows. So I appreciate everybody who's listened to my shows. You know, I really care a whole lot about child abuse, and this really bothers me because, you know, like I went on and on for 900 shows talking about the fact that I was abused as a child, and we just slipped through the cracks, my siblings and myself, and sadly enough, and so many children do. And that's why we see, you know, all these reports in the headlines in the newspaper and on the news and on the internet about children who have slipped through the cracks and are either murdered or killed because of the abuse or died because of the injuries sustained, you know, by their abusers, whoever they are, or they're in the hospital, you know, due to the injuries and whatnot from abuse, and it's horrible. It just shouldn't be happening. And, you know, I just felt like I needed to raise my voice along with everybody else. Like I saw that there was a whole lot of great advocates out there and activists and stuff speaking very clearly and very loudly out there. You know, let's stop child abuse. And I just wanted to be one more person while I could. You know, I thought, hey, well, I've got nothing better to do with my time right now, so why not, you know? And I feel like, well, you know, I have a voice. I can use it. You know, I don't have a lot of money to donate, unfortunately, and I don't have a whole lot of time to donate to, you know, to helping children and whatnot. So I thought, hey, I can use my voice and I can be a public speaker, just talking about child abuse, the repercussions, and the issues surrounding it. And just in my studies of what I've run across, like over the years, you know, since my own historical background of being abused, you know, it's horrific what these kids are going through, and I feel sadness for every single one of them that have ever been abused, and there's so many, you know, millions and billions and billions since time began. So it's horrible. It needs to stop, and it's just ridiculous. I have this interesting article that I found based on 2012 information, which is kind of rare because, you know, we're in 2012 right now, and usually you don't see publications coming out same year. Usually you see 2012 information coming out in 2013 or 2014. Like it takes them at least a year to get the information out. But there is an article. It's not an article. It's a PDF booklet you can download from the Child Welfare Information Gateway, and it's quite interesting. You know, the same old information, a few little twists and whatnot, but it's pretty much the same old information. Because really, I mean, you know, stopping child abuse is not rocket science. You know, you don't have to have like some sort of a massive doctorate. Like, this is simple. You know, stop hurting children, stop abusing children, and yet it goes on and on and on. You know, due to so many factors, and it's really sad when it comes down to the person who has care. You know, who's responsible for the care and the well-being of these children, whoever they are, that are being abused and killed and tortured and maimed and psychologically screwed for the rest of their lives. You know, it comes down to these caregivers, you know, whether they're parents or grandparents, somebody in the family, babysitters, coaches, somebody who's got a child, got neighbors, somebody who's gotten a hold of the child, you know, or children. And it's pathetic. It's really pathetic. And I mean, I've been on here night after night after night griping about this, you know, and I mean, everybody knows my stance on it. But, you know, it's frustrating because it's just something that should just be common knowledge. Like, you just don't do these things to children. If you have to lash out, you know, go punch a pillow or something. You don't abuse a child just because of your adult problems. You know what I mean? And these younger kids who are abusing children abusing children, I mean, they need psychological help, you know? Like, it's not okay to abuse a child ever, right? There's no excuse for child abuse. It's not okay. And I love to stand up and say that because there's so many people in the world that disagree. And I love to stand up and say that. It is not okay to abuse a child, and it never will be. And there's no excuse for child abuse. There's no reason on this planet. There's no good excuse for any of it. It's adults and whoever getting a hold of children who really have no business being around children, right? That's really what it all comes down to. But it's frustrating because you see these articles, and I'm going to go ahead and just sort of read through this 2012 resource guide. It's from Child Welfare Information Gateway called Preventing Child Maltreatment and Promoting Wellbeing, a Network for Action. It was put out by the Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families. They have a letter there from the commissioner and whatnot. You can catch this from, you can pick this up from Child Welfare Information Gateway, which is www.childwelfare.gov/preventing. So it's called Preventing Child Maltreatment and Promoting Wellbeing, a Network for Action. The information is pretty well close to the other stuff that you see out there that I've seen in the past, and laying the groundwork, prevention, promotion, well-being of the network for action, levers for change, nurturing and attachment, working with families, 6 protective factors, nurturing and attachment, knowledge of parenting and child development, parental resilience. This is the stuff they're always talking about. Social connections, concrete support for parents. And I went through and spelled it out like on my shows, my 900 shows that I did, talking about, it has a lot to do with it. I sort of went through and talked about the situation that my parents were in and why, they were doing what they did, which was to, abuse each other and abuse us. And it really had everything to do with that. It had everything to do with these 6 protective factors. If people just want to sort of read through those, it is very clearly the issue. Sadly enough, people, these are people that, we could be walking down the street right next to somebody who's abusing their child. You don't know that. They're not going to come up and say, "Hi, I abuse my child." And if you don't know what to look for, you don't know what the signs are, not close enough with the family or able to see the child on a regular basis, you may not ever know that a child's being abused, And even if the signs are there, quite often, what's being done? Not a whole lot. Because many times children are left to remain in the home as long as there's no threat to their life. Many times, social services and different child protection agencies will state that, they don't remove children unless there's an actual threat to that child's life. So people are getting away with abusing their children, which is just absolutely horrific. And then on the flip side, you have children being taken out of good homes. So, the whole thing is messed up. The whole thing is really messed up. And when you see an article, like I was saying in the beginning here, or a PDF such as this information here, it all seems real easy, that people should be able to figure this stuff out. It's not hard. It's the fact that we're not reaching the people that are abusing the children. Generally, the people that would read this information would be people that actually care about children or work with children. The people out there that are abusing children, they obviously are not looking for the information on how to not abuse children, or they wouldn't be doing it. Sadly enough, that's the whole issue. How do you reach these people? What do you look for? There's so many slip through the cracks. So there's things being done. There's support groups for families nowadays, whereas before there really wasn't much out there, for parents who may be at risk for abusing their children, or, single parents or whatever, parents or caregivers, right? There's a whole lot more support now than there ever was. But is it helping? Not really, because you think about how many cases are actually, assessed real cases of child abuse. There's so many that are reported, but then there's so many that are actual cases that it's in the hundreds of millions. It's absolutely crazy per year, just in the United States. That doesn't include Canada. So I just want to kind of take a look at this PDF, and I'm not going to read through the whole thing. It's quite large. Chapter 2 is working with families, the 6 protective factors. It goes on talking about nurturing and attachment and programs that can help, and just questions and answers for parents who may be having difficulties. Knowledge of parenting and child development, that's a big one. What I want to look at is the actual, child abuse portion of this, right? What are the signs? What are the symptoms? And what to look for? And I think that people just don't realize, like, you could be the last person that could see a child before, alive, right? And if you don't report it, the child, you may help save a child's life by reporting it. If you believe or you even have a smallest inkling that a child is being abused, make the call. People say, well, is it better to make the call? You could be breaking up a happy family, Well, if the child's not being abused, then they're not going to remove the child. They don't even remove children that they're supposed to. They don't even remove children that need to be removed from their homes because they're being abused or need intervention, right? Like my family, we were, like, my parents were brought up on child abuse charges. They had to go to court. And, so basically there was an intervention done, and we had social workers around for a while. And, while the social workers were there, well, sure, my parents weren't beating on anybody because the social workers were around. But as soon as the social workers were gone, it was like back to the way it was. And so that happens. It's unfortunate, but this happens, and it's just sad. Like, so why? Like, why? It's always a big question with me. I'm always asking why. I'll never understand. But I guess we've got to keep asking the question. Sheer ignorance, as far as I'm concerned. But there's no need to abuse a child. Absolutely not. So Chapter 4 of this PDF is called Protecting Children. And they go on to talk about what is child abuse and neglect. And they say child abuse or neglect often takes place in the home at the hands of a person the child knows well, a parent, relative, babysitter, friend of the family. It can take place anywhere, actually, anywhere the child is. People say, well, where does child abuse occur? Well, it's anywhere where the child is, because children are abused in schools, daycares, babysitters' homes, neighbors' homes, other people's homes, not necessarily at their own home, not always, but they have done studies, and they have found that about 80% of all child abuse is perpetrated by the parent, a parent or both parents. It's whoever has the most access to the child generally, not always, but it will be somebody that will have access to the child, obviously, right? Even if it's just for a few minutes, as seen in a lot of cases with child sexual abuse, people getting a hold of children in stores and sexually assaulting them and stuff, that, maybe a very short period of time that stranger has, time with that child, but it's enough to completely change that child's life, that whole family's life, so it's where the children are. That's where the abuse is taking place, right? And what are the signs? And they go through and talk a little bit about the signs and state what it is. Neglect, failure to provide for a child's basic needs, and each state's responsible, they said, for establishing its own definitions of child abuse and neglect that meet federal minimum standards, but most include the following. Neglect is a failure to provide for a child's basic needs, and physical abuse is physical injury as a result of hitting, kicking, shaking, burning, or otherwise harming a child. And sexual abuse is any situation where a child is used for sexual gratification, and this may include indecent exposure, rape, commercial exploitation through prostitution, or production of pornographic materials. Emotional abuse is any pattern of behavior that impairs a child's emotional development or sense of self-worth, including constant criticism, threats, and rejection. And they say, why does child abuse occur? Child abuse and neglect affect children of every age, race, and family income level. They said, however, there are some, that are associated with an increased risk of child abuse and neglect. Studies also have shown that when multiple risk factors are present, the risk is greater. For instance, poverty, single parents maybe with little support, families placed under stress by poverty, divorce, child's disability. Some families are stressed by worries about foreclosure, employment, health, substance abuse, mental health, domestic violence, or other problems. And some are simply unaware of how to care for the child's basic needs. So there's many factors sort of that can be present that can kind of create, more at risk, for child abuse, right? So here's what's really sad. They said, how many children are abused and neglected in the United States? They said in 2010, the most recent year for which national child maltreatment statistics are available, about 3.3 million reports were made to Child Protective Services concerning the safety and well-being of approximately 5.9 million children. 3.3 million reports. That's just in the United States, right? That's not worldwide. That's just the States. As a result of these reports, a nationally estimated 695,000 unique count of children were found to be victims of child abuse or neglect. So that's almost 700,000. That's in 2010. That's in 2010. I mean, like, I was reading some articles a long time ago. This was probably a couple of years ago, close to it anyway, a year and a half, where they were saying that there were certain states that, in certain counties in certain states that down in the states that were so overrun by child abuse victims that these children were on waiting lists to receive any kind of attention. I'm like, that's insane. That means, whole counties of people down there are abusing children. I mean, this is really tragic, It really is. Like, and people still walk around, thinking child abuse. Well, what's the big deal about child abuse, Like, it's a big deal. Children have rights. I'm really a huge promoter for human rights as well as child rights, especially child rights, because children cannot stand up for themselves. They need protection, and they need somebody to step in, and they need somebody to stand up for them and do the right thing by them. And if it's not going to be the parents or the caregivers, then it needs to be somebody else, So whoever comes along, whether it's a teacher or a neighbor or somebody in the family, a relative or something, somebody needs to stand up for these children and do the right thing and get these kids some help, because if it's whoever it is that's abusing them certainly isn't going to get their kids any help. Because they don't care about their children or they wouldn't be abusing them, right? So it's really sad. Like, it's very sad. These headlines that roll out all the time, it's frustrating, to know that this is still happening, and we're still working to try to, as a population on the planet, there have been lots of people working at least for probably the last at least 30 to 40 years trying to change this, and I mean even before that, a little bit before that, 1800s I'd say, but it's just sad and tragic, and people say, oh well, such is life, and I hate when people say that, because I was abused as a child. That's such a cop-out. It's like excusing away everything. It's like, oh well, and it's just because, okay, so we can't fix it today, so let's just excuse it away. No. That just doesn't fly with me at all, right? I mean, we have to, as a human population here, like, we need to change this. And budget cuts aren't going to do the job, like cutting the budgets that are, to the funding and to the programs and to the manpower that are running these programs is definitely not the answer. They need to come up with some new programs, they really do. I was doing some research looking into what was actually working a long time ago. This has to be at least a year and a half ago or so, a long time ago on one of my shows. And I did a little bit of research looking around to see what was working, and they found that there were programs that were working. And these programs were, the problem being is that they only tried them out in like 4 different counties, 4 different cities, in 4 different neighborhoods. So, they got like a cross-section between these 4 different areas, and they found that these programs actually worked, that they were utilizing to minimize child abuse of all types, and that the children remained in the home, the child abuse stopped, and they followed these families all the way through till the child was grown and out of the home, and they really watched it, and they found that there are programs that do work. The problem being is the government won't fund it. It's really sad. People, how do you fix something that's so ingrained in our society? I mean, how do you fix something that people just think they have the right to do these things to children? And that's what I've been talking about, especially, for the last 900 shows, is I just don't understand why people think that it's okay to hurt a child. It's just not. And people say, oh, well, child sexual abuse doesn't hurt a child. Well, they're incredibly wrong when they say that, I griped about my last show was like April 17th here when I sort of took a break there. But prior to that, I had been talking a whole lot about child sexual abuse because I'm facing that myself, facing my healing recovery journey from being abused sexually as a child. And I'll tell you, it hurts. And it can screw your life up. I mean, I know people who are suicidal because of child sexual abuse and, who attempted suicide, and people think, oh, child abuse, sexual abuse doesn't hurt a child. Well, talk to some survivors, and we'll tell you a little different story. I don't know where they're getting their information from, but there are people out there saying this. They're incredibly wrong. They're in error, And they need to talk to some survivors of child sexual abuse and get the full picture of what it actually does to you, to your life, to your very psyche, to everything that you are. And it doesn't mean that people can't heal and make great progress, and I'm all about that. And, have a full life, because I truly believe it's doable. But it completely messes a child's life up, and so does child abuse, because I've experienced it all, So, I know what it's like for these kids out here. People think, oh, well, they'll just get over it. Really? Will they? I don't know. 2 of my brothers killed themselves. Let's try that one on for size. I knew so many people who were abused as children, children, growing up and into my teens, who ended up in ridiculous life situations, which I was heading on the same road, who made a mess of their lives because of their upbringing. They were unable to deal with it. And there's a whole world of people out there just like that. And many of them will, not all, but many will go on to abuse their own children or other children. Many won't, but there'll be many that will. Sadly enough, it's a cycle. It just passes on generation to generation unless you stop it yourself. And, how do we stop this? Without having people just sit there and say, oh, well, too bad, such is life. Too bad for those kids that they're abused, Oh, well. No, I don't think that's cool. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Just because something's hard doesn't mean that we can't do it. People say, how are we going to stop child abuse? Well, we got to find a way. And we need to keep working at it, until we do come up with a way. And we need to keep pressuring the government for more funding, not budget cuts. We need more funding, I see, childhood cancer research. That's great. I'm all for it because, cancer is horrible and it's deadly. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with supporting that at all. As a matter of fact, I do. But the issue is that there's so many people out there who are willing to promote finding a cure for cancer, but yet when you talk to them about child abuse, they just shut up. They just clam up. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. I got no time for that. Why? Because it hits at the very deep core psyche of our own beings. Because so many people are those frightened children that were abused, and they can't deal with it. And so many people knew children who were abused, and so many people were the abusers. Abusers certainly don't want to get involved to try to help find an answer or a solution to this problem. So, you look at a very small portion of people that are willing to stand up and say, no, this is wrong, and we need to do something about this, and we need to keep working on it and not give up on it, And so, that's do all we can, because, not everybody, like I said, has a lot of money to donate or time to give, but it's just doing something once in a while, throwing in a little bit of time or a little bit of passing around information, sharing information, looking out for kids around you to make sure that they're not being abused, and just keeping an eye on children in your own lives, to make sure that they're not being abused. I think that's really important, because that's so many times children are slipping through the cracks. And, it's like, no one knew that these children's bones were broken or that they were, being abused. It's like somebody knows, but somebody's not saying anything. And many times it's out of fear for their own lives. And, that does happen. But a lot of times it's just that they don't want to get involved, because then they'll have to, it'll make waves, and so many times the abusers have friends, they're looked up at in society, they're looked up to. People think, well, we can't get involved because, if we turn them in, and even though we know they're abusing their children, who's going to promote the summer barbecue? Who's going to, it's kind of like, people have a relationship with the adults who are abusing the children. So many times they won't turn them in. And that's a lot of the situations out there, and that was the case for my case too. And, my parents had a lot of friends. They had a lot of support, even though nobody cared what they were doing to their children. And so, even today, people back up my abuser parents, right? Because, they just love them. Well, sure. That's great. Well, they weren't beating on their friends. My mom didn't go out and start beating on the neighbors, and my dad didn't go around kicking the crap out of the neighbors. They just did that to their children. And then they went out and had a great time with the neighbors, right? So they develop a great relationship with the whole neighborhood, and continue to abuse their children forever. So this is the way it goes for so many children. There will be no support for them. There will be no help. The people that are supposed to mandatorily report abuse sometimes won't. Neighbors that know a child's being abused don't want to get involved out of fear a lot of times, so they won't. And, the internal family members out of fear, they think, oh, well, if I turn my dad in, or if I turn my mom in, what will happen, and the family will fall apart. And there's all these fear-based stuff, which is really true. But the issue is these children's lives count, and they have human rights. They have the right to life, and they have the right to an abuse-free life. And sadly enough, their rights are being taken away. And I say, really, honestly, they should start prosecuting under the Human Rights Act, and stop prosecuting under, just maltreatment. Okay, 1 or 2 years in prison. Okay, time off for good behavior. They need to treat it like a human rights violation, because children have human rights. And I think if these abusers, over the next 5 years or something, were sentenced to really extremely heavy duty sentencing, people would think twice a little bit. They'd think a little bit more about it. Because right now what you have is people abusing children who may do time and may not. They might lose their children, but they don't care because they abuse their children. They don't want them anyway. What they do is these people are generally between 20, 30 years old. They go out and they have more children. So they pop out more babies. And then they abuse those babies or kill them. And they do a little bit of time, maybe a couple of years. And then they get out and they have a couple more. And this is the cycle that we're seeing out here. And this is actually true. It's happening. And, it's sad. It's really twisted. And people who kill children, as far as I'm concerned, should be, held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. Children cannot protect themselves. I mean, hey, I think, I'm not sitting here saying it's not bad to kill an adult. I'm just saying that adults killing children is sick and wrong and twisted. And, I don't care, even if they didn't intend to kill the child dies because of the abuse. It shouldn't affect the decision. It shouldn't affect the sentencing. They should just be put away, as far as I'm concerned, for life. Because why should they get another opportunity to have more children, to kill those children, or to get a hold of another child and kill those children? That's my opinion, but that's how I feel about it. And I just think that there's not harsh enough sentencing. People know, they're on drugs and whatever. They sell their kids off, trade their kids for drugs, let people sexually abuse their children. And they know that there's going to be absolutely no repercussions. They might do a little bit of time in some sort of system, like some sort of jail or some sort of prison or something. It'd be a very short amount of time, and they know they can come back out and do the same thing again. And they don't care about those kids. They just pop them out, and they don't care that they're gone. And they'll just have more, unwanted pregnancies, but they won't do the right thing and give them up. You know what I mean? They'll just keep them, and they'll just abuse those kids. And this is what we see. I mean, and this is not the only situation, but it's one of them. And it's just to show just how far down our society, right now really is. And the rest of the world just goes on its merry way. Oh, yeah, support this, support that, and who cares about these children out here who are dying? Well, let me tell you, I do. And I hope you do too, and I hope you'll get involved and do what you can to make a difference, no matter what it is. Speak out, and you see a child, you think, oh, my God, I think that child's being abused. You do something about it. You do the right thing. You make a phone call. And have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon. Take care.